AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Stuart Mason. Stuart is the Manager of Data Science at Anvil. Stuart, welcome to the show.
JP, so much for having me.
Our pleasure. So let's start, Stuart. Can you give us a little bit of background of yourself, how you first got involved in technology, some of the roles you've held along the way, leading us up to your current role at Anvil?
I was a mechanical engineering student, graduated in 2014. And that was my introduction, I suppose, to like technical thinking and systems and problem solving. Adored it, the classwork, but found that the industry itself was not as exciting as learning about the industry. I think a lot of the Wild West of that industry is behind us. So I was looking for an industry where things were a little less defined. And this was 2013, 14-ish, which was not the start of the big data wave, but the first time I was starting to hear about it. So last minute, senior spring, I took a bunch of stats and computer science classes, built up what I thought were the right skills, and found a job as a data analyst when I graduated. And that was a wonderful role at a great company. They're now called HopJump. They were Cognius at the time. And they taught me everything I know about data and how to make business decisions in a data-driven way and how to structure analyses and how to lead a team. So great organization, great people, and they really set me up to take the next step in my career, which came in 2017, springtime. A friend of a friend introduced me to Rodney Manzo, who was building a team to start his supply chain company. I don't think the name was Anvil yet at the time. So we spoke for several months. It was a bit of a challenge, him being a supply chain expert without much of a tech background, me being a data scientist without much of a supply chain background. We had a hard time establishing a common language, but we got there, and ultimately I got the job offer in August and joined the team as the fourth hire in the fall of 2017. I've been there ever since.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So it's important to know, I think you left out, you probably should mention yourself. So you're a Harvard grad in engineering sciences, so it's no mean feat. It's quite impressive. So you've given us the journey. Anvil. Who are Anvil? What are you guys doing? I obviously know, you've told me many times, it's incredibly interesting, but for anyone listening who's not familiar with the organization, what are you guys doing?
I guess the mission statement is modernizing and digitizing supply chains. The hypothesis is the way supply chains run were solved or designed in like the early 1900s with the world wars and sort of industrialization. And the methods and approach to the problems that are presented are stuck in that era. And we have more powerful tools now to organize information and learn from information and present information that is not being leveraged in that space. And we're not the only ones to have this idea. There are a handful of companies that all see this problem, and we're all sort of working, maybe not together, but in parallel to solve it.
Absolutely, Stuart. Look, I think incredibly interesting industry, even before modern global disruption of supply chain. You and I have been speaking over the past few months, and it's incredibly exciting what you guys are aiming to do, but it's now front and center on the global economy as to how important it is to have modern supply chain methods and services. So it would be good to give some examples of what you guys are doing day to day, some of the organizations that you're helping, and some examples of the type of impact you guys can have for organizations.
Yeah, that's great. So I think to understand what we're doing, maybe a little more about the problem. In a nutshell, it's just that information is segmented right now. A little bit of vocabulary. So when we talk about supply chain, there are generally, we can simplify it anyway with two parties, what we call brands and what we call suppliers. So brands sell goods to consumers, and suppliers sell goods to brands. So if you're Apple, you have a supplier who takes your designs and actually builds your electronics, and then that's the relationship. So this communication between brands and suppliers happens on the telephone. It happens in email. They send spreadsheets back and forth, and so there's valuable information locked up in those communications that relates to each other, but it's not useful in an email. It's not useful in a spreadsheet. So really just having that conversation and that collaboration happen online is our first step. Put all the information in a place where it can be accessed by a computer system or by a human who can see it all at once, and solve problems with all the data in one spot. I think is, if I had to boil down our philosophy, it would be to that. And once again, this is not groundbreaking. This has been done in other industries already to great effect, and we're not the only one who have identified this as the problem in supply chain. It's just a lot harder to do it than it is to say it.
You did a pretty good job of explaining it, so thank you very much. So to help people visualize what this actually means and you know how it's impacting businesses, could you give us an example of a client who, before you guys came along, were working a certain way, and how through the use of your platform and leveraging the data, you were able to have a significant impact? I know you and I speaking privately, you've given me some incredible examples, so I think it would be good to showcase what the capabilities are and how you can really transform, you know, what are centuries-old industries, and even ones who may think they're modern and are using modern technology in so many other facets of their business, but on supply chain are still lagging behind.
The most common thing we hear is just the ease of having everything in one place. Purchase order generation is like a very easy task, and we send it automatically to the relevant supplier. If it's an assembly that has many parts that come together to make one thing that maybe is built by different suppliers in different places, we're able to handle routing those requests where they need to be and the quantities they need to be, and then also surfacing back to the maker, the brand, the status of those orders and regular check-ins from the supplier. Yes, this thing began production when it was supposed to. Yes, this thing is now on track to ship out when it's supposed to. Yes, this thing did ship out on this date. Or no, it did not. Here's why. Here's the new estimate. So just information up to date for the brands. You know, many of our brands have had positive things to say about this. I wish I could pull up some testimonials and really go into the specifics of, you know, we helped brand X this way. But I can say, you know, we worked with Hims, Swell, Native, a lot of really recognizable direct-to-consumer brands.
Excellent. I think it's important to know, before companies like yourself came along, this was still very much analog, and it was almost impossible to track a supply chain performance from various vendors, and you guys are really adding visibility to an industry that was hard to quantify. And I think anytime an organization could get visibility, it can judge performance. There's an absolute need. The best ideas are solving obvious problems. I want to focus on your role and how data science drives the business forward, because I think, you know, being employee 4 in a startup poses unique challenges, but also interesting opportunity to help shape the strategy. So it'd be good to understand what your role consists of and how it's evolved over time from joining as employee 4 to where you are now.
Yes, absolutely. And I perhaps didn't know this as well back then as I do now, but I think a common piece of wisdom is, when you're a young company, you don't need a data scientist, you need a data specialist, a data person, someone who can do all kinds of data adjacent things for the business. And 3 years on, we're just maturing to the point where that is stopping being the case. And really now we are looking at different data functions that the organization needs. But in sort of since we're in that hybrid phase right now, I'd say my team focuses on 2 things mainly. The first is how to make Anvil a more data-driven organization. So how can we help the sales team? How can we help the customer success team sift through their data, improve their processes, get good visibility into the states of their projects? Similarly, we work very closely with the product team to help make our product design process as data-driven as possible. So we build a feature with an expectation, we measure its impact, but also thinking aspirationally about what a smart AI-driven Anvil might look like in a year or two. So building our product such that we're collecting valuable, clean data that will be useful later to help our users with smarter applications of that data. So that's probably the two broad roles there is making Anvil itself data-driven, and then thinking about how to design Anvil so that it's a data product for our customers.
Excellent, thank you. So I know many data scientists have aspirations of getting in an organization from an ambitious startup from day one, or the equivalent of day one as the very first data scientist, and want to be part of shaping that environment. But you and I have spoken a few times now about the expectation versus the reality. I think it would be good to understand what the early days were like, some of the main challenges that you've had to overcome, and the differences from working in a true startup to maybe a more established organization. Could you talk to us a little bit about that journey and what you learned along the way?
Yes. It took me too long to roll up my sleeves and do things in a not scalable, manual way. So the example that comes to mind is, the organization was 6 people big. We don't have a proper CRM. We're tracking all of our customers in a Google Doc, and it's got the contract, the billing cadence. It's all there in a Google Doc. It's very messy. It's not very convenient for a software process to extract information from that. So we sort of, the problem with supply chain writ very small at our own company. For a very long time, fretted over not being able to properly report on how many users were active on a given day because this document was structured improperly. And if I could do it again, I would have just manually kept my own document in sync with that document. That was the structure I wanted, week to week. And it would have been not AI, not smart, and it would have been like a time sync for an hour, maybe once a day. Well, sorry, 1 day a week. But it would have gotten the job done. We would have had the information we needed when the CEO wanted to see it or whatever. So I would say just being willing to do things that are not smart, that are not high tech, but are important, was probably the lesson that I would give to myself were I to have a conversation with me the day I started at Anvil. As it has evolved, the most important thing I've learned is that you have to stay on top of technologies. Data science, as I've experienced it, has been much less about dreaming up what model to use here or how to write this query there, and more about, okay, what does our data stack need to be to enable the things we want to do? So less about solving specific problems and more about finding technologies, I'd say, is another lesson I learned.
Okay, I think those are two very important points that you make, particularly for aspiring data scientists or people moving from academia. Is it's not about using the most impressive algorithm or the most modern tool. It's about what does the business need at that given time and adding value. And can you utilize it for its intended purpose, which is understanding what the business needs, as opposed to doing things the way you want, but there being a disconnect. And I think that's good to learn about. Had you and I done this podcast 6 months ago, there would be certain things that we would discuss, but the change in landscape in what's gone on recently is put supply chain and logistics very much in the forefront. It would be good to understand the conversations that Anvil are having and some of the great work that you guys are doing to help organizations navigate these turbulent times, and then talk about how you see the opportunity once the economic dust settles.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's absolutely true that the character of our conversation has been changed necessarily by world events. It certainly has highlighted that this problem exists, that there's not good visibility into complex global supply chains. Data doesn't all live in one place where you can learn from it readily. But also it has highlighted the fragility of these things, in as much as you take out one popular source of supply and it seems like the whole thing ground to a halt for a month or two. So certainly it's reinforced that the problem is there. In the short term, we've fortunately had the opportunity to help. We've got a great team of sourcing experts at Anvil that are helping a number of organizations get their hands on masks, hand sanitizer, ventilators to deal with COVID-19. And so we're going to continue to do that in the short term and help plug the holes where we can and keep things moving. In the longer term, where we're trying to decide what this might mean about the future of supply chain, we mentioned before we started the interview, there's some conversations. Does this mean supply chains should be more regional, so that global problems don't affect you in your neighborhood? I personally feel that might be a misguided reactive approach. I would say the lesson is increased agility is important. So, and my coworker Will Davis, Anvil's head of global supply chain, gave a great presentation on this. But basically, how to set up contingency plans for when things like this do happen. And I'd say that a key lesson is just being able to change your supply chain when you need to. So there's a problem in China, for example. Can you source a similar or identical product from South America in the meantime?
Yeah, I think you and I spoke about it in detail, particularly when it comes to essential items, whether it's generic life-saving drugs, which are produced almost 100% in mainland China. I think it was scary to see how exposed we can be with a shutdown, even if only for a few weeks. But it's good to also get your perspective from somebody in the know, is that we don't need to do a complete change. We just need to be more efficient. Focusing on what's next, particularly within data science for you and as the organization grows, how do you see your role evolve leading the data science function? And then also the scale of the opportunity for you guys as a business, but also your data team specifically.
Yeah, I mean, so Rodney Manzo, the founder CEO of Anvil, would emphatically say that Anvil is a data company, and there's a ton of potential for all the things we could do and how large the data science team at Anvil could grow. Our sort of medium-term conversation around this centers around how do we make the product smarter. And the analogy that often gets used is meteorology. So I can tell you the temperature right now, which is useful. You want to know information about the weather right now, but of course, what you'd really like to know is if it's going to rain tomorrow. So how do we make predictions? How do we aid making decisions for our users? Is what we're thinking about as goals for the end of this year. Okay, let's start making the products not just be a store of information where you can know the state of your orders, but maybe it can give you a clue about the state of your orders tomorrow. So that's, I'd say, is our next big challenge.
Excellent. Speaking as a data scientist, you had an incredibly strong background before going into Anvil, lots of options available to you at all times. What do you love most about your role at Anvil? Leading the data science practice and seeing the company grow from 4-person startup to where it is now. What are you enjoying most about your role?
It's a pleasure to learn from people with different skill sets. Certainly never would have been exposed to supply chain had I not come to Anvil. But there's also a bunch of talented people doing other functions that it's just invigorating. It's motivating to be around them and to be in conversations with them and learning from them. And I think technical people, engineers, data scientists, we all approach problems in a systematic and similar way that I think we believe to be a very good way or the right way, but it's not the only way. And it's very nice to be exposed to other ways of thinking and problem solving. A little bit more specific maybe to like what motivates me about data at Anvil. It's the impact. Everything, if you look around you, everything if you're indoors, is manufactured. It was created in a factory somewhere, and I am motivated by the thought of being a part of that process. And my impact then is sort of can however small that impact is, it can be seen in many places, perhaps.
Excellent. I want to finish on what you were looking for as you grow and build a successful data team. like any startup, the first few hires are critical, particularly when you're building out a new division. So you want to make sure you get the balance right between technical fit and attitude and culture. So as a leader of a data science practice, what do you look for as you consider candidates and as you look to build your team?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think one that I have strong opinions in this question, but not ones that I don't think are terribly radical or visionary. I think this will be things that many of the listeners have heard before, but it's about execution and solving problems and knowing what a business needs. So when I'm interviewing a candidate, for example, I like to see Kaggle. I like to see that they've dabbled in hard computational challenges. But what I really like to see is that they understand the relationship between data and the real world, and how and when to use data to solve a problem or make a process simpler. And of course, I also index on coachability, right? So if we're talking through a problem, are you open-minded? Do you want to hear my perspective on it, or do you try to drive through it all on your own? And I also I tend to like to hire people. Like, I'm a bit young. I know that I have a lot to learn, so I also try to hire people who maybe are very strong in aspects of data where I'm a bit weaker.
I think that last point is great to hear, particularly it shows humility, but also collaboration, and that you're not afraid to acknowledge that no one data science is going to be expert level across all areas, and it's actually healthy to have a nice mix and balance. And sometimes that means hiring individuals who might be more seasoned or more experienced, but as long as you're collaborative, it can work out incredibly well. And I think I see that in a lot of the more advanced data science organizations, that there's that great approach to hiring a diverse team, diversity in skill set and background, and it's really healthy to hear. Finishing on then, what's the exciting projects, or what will we be most excited about when you and I catch up again in 2 years' time and we look at the next phase of Anvil as a business? Obviously, the here and now is getting through this interesting time, but where are we going to see the business growing to in the next 24 months?
Wonderful question. So in as much as our sort of thesis is that information needs to connect and live in one place, and the data about shipments should inform the data about inventory, should inform the data about pricing. We're now building our product into more of the hub of a wheel with many spokes coming off. We want to integrate with accounting software. We want to integrate with warehouse management software. We want to integrate with sales software, and basically make Anvil a part of a company's tech stack. And it can push information to systems that need information. It can draw information from systems that have information, and be sort of the digital command center for your supply chain.
I like that. Digital command center for your supply chain. I think that's a great way to finish an excellent interview. Stuart, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and good luck with all your efforts. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.
JP, thank you so much.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.